He stole water to save 3 starving kids. For that, they tied him to a cactus under a burning sky. But fate wasn't done with Elias Hart. Not when the girl he once saved was coming back for him. And this time, she owed him her life. The first buzzards came at noon. Elias Hart could barely lift his head, but he heard the slow flap of wings and the dry-throated hiss of a bird testing the wind. His lips were cracked open, blood stuck to his gums, and the heat had peeled the top layer off his shoulders. He hadn't screamed in hours. His throat was too raw for that. The cactus needles still bit through the ropes at his back, though the pain had dulled into something strange, something numb and distant, like it was happening to someone else. The sun blazed down with no mercy. Not here. Not ever. It had been a shallow spring, not even marked on maps, just a narrow crack in the earth that sometimes bled clean water after snowmelt. He hadn't stolen much, just 2 canteens and a child's tin cup. But that didn't matter to the town of Dryfield. The law here wasn't about justice. It was about power. And the man who held that power, Sheriff Otto Crane, had long ago decided Elias Hart was guilty of existing, let alone surviving. Thieving half-breed son of no one, Otto had spat as he kicked Elias to his knees. Should have let you rot when your mama died in that storm. The rope had gone around Elias's wrists, then his chest, tying him backwards to the thorned arms of a cactus older than most graves. They hadn't even given him a trial. Just laughter, just spit in the dirt, just a crowd that dispersed the moment the first flies arrived. He closed his eyes, thought of the kids, 3 of them. Dust-streaked faces and bellies swollen with hunger, lips purple from thirst. They weren't even his. Not really. Just orphans huddled in the broken lean-to by the rail yard. One of them, Tommy, had tried to trade a button for bread 2 nights ago. The baker had slapped him so hard he'd bled from the nose. So Elias did what he had to, when no one else would. He stole water. And now, the vulture circled. A hot gust of wind kicked dust into his face. Elias tried to turn away, but his neck barely moved. His mind started slipping again, back to other days, other suns. He thought of Clara, but only in pieces. A girl with hands too small for the gun she carried. A girl who'd stood over her father's broken body and didn't cry. 12 years old and already carved out of grief. He'd save her once. Took a knife to the ribs for her when a raider tried to finish the job her father started. But that had been 2 years ago. He hadn't seen her since. He didn't even know if she lived. Another buzzard landed nearby, bold now, just a few feet away, staring. Elias tried to spit at it. Nothing came out but dust. A sound broke through the stillness. Hoofbeats. Fussed. His head lolled to the side. A rider. No, 2. Moving hard through the brush, sun at their backs. Elias blinked. Thought it was another hallucination. Maybe death had come on horseback. Then he saw her. She pulled the reins hard, kicking up dust and stopping just feet from him. The mare reared once before settling. The girl slid down in one movement and sprinted across the sand. God almighty, she gasped. Elias. He tried to smile, but his face wouldn't obey. Clarabelle Mason dropped to her knees, reaching trembling fingers toward the rope. She looked older now, 19 maybe, sun-toughened and lean, hair cut short and tucked under a scarf. A rifle was slung across her back, and there were bruises blooming under her jaw. But her eyes, those stayed the same. Bright, frantic, fierce. Who did this? She asked, her voice ragged. Behind her, a man dismounted, tall, silent, with a shotgun in one hand and suspicion in the other. He scanned the horizon, watching for movement. Crane, Elias managed to croak. Down. Clara's hands shook as she cut the ropes. The fibers broke slowly, stubborn, crusted with blood. When they snapped loose, Elias slumped forward into her arms. She caught him barely. You remember me? She asked. He coughed once, dry, painful, but nodded. You were the girl with a knife. Clara smiled, tears cutting lines through the dirt on her cheeks. You saved me once. I ain't forgot. The man behind her spoke for the first time. We gotta move. Clara nodded. Help me lift him. Between them, they half-dragged, half-carried Elias to the horses. The second rider, who Clara called Boone, mounted first, offering a hand to help hoist Elias up. The pain nearly knocked Elias out again, but he clung to the saddle horn, teeth gritted. Clara rode behind him, arms steady, holding him upright. They rode until the sun dipped behind the red hills. By dusk, they reached a hidden gulch thick with mesquite and brush. A narrow stream trickled nearby, just enough for water and quiet. Boone built a fire with dry twigs while Clara cleaned Elias's back with careful hands. Each touch made him flinch, but he didn't pull away. "Why'd you come back?" he asked finally, voice raspy. Clara didn't answer right away. She dabbed at the worst of the cactus wounds before meeting his eyes. Heard what Crane did. "And I saw those kids. You went back." She nodded. They were hiding behind the storehouse, scared out of their minds. "Took him to old Widow Gray's place. She'll keep him safe." Elias's throat tightened. He stared into the fire, jaw clenched. "Why'd you come for me?" he whispered. Clara reached for her rifle and set it across her lap. "Because you came for me. And because this ain't over, Elias." "You think they'll stop at just tying you up? They want to make an example. They'll come again." Boone nodded grimly. "Crane won't let this slide. Not with witnesses. Not with words spreading." Elias tried to sit straighter, but pain lanced through his ribs. "I can't fight," he said bitter. "Can't even stand." Clara's eyes burned in the firelight. "Then we fight for you." The night deepened. Coyotes yipped in the distance. Elias drifted in and out of sleep, fever dancing behind his eyes. Every time he woke, Clara was there, feeding the fire or spooning water to his lips. And then, just before dawn, a whisper on the wind. "Boots." "Many." Boone snapped awake, rifle in hand. Clara was already up, crouched by the rocks, her breath steady. From the ridge above came the low murmur of voices. Men, maybe 10 or 12. Elias tried to sit up, but Clara pushed him gently back down. "They found us," Boone hissed. Clara didn't flinch. "They ain't talking him again," she whispered. "Not while I breathe." And just like that, the fire wasn't the hottest thing in that gulch anymore. The first shot cracked through the dawn like a whip, loud, close, final. A puff of dust exploded just inches from Boone's boot, and for one tight breath of silence, no one moved. Then chaos erupted. Clara yanked Elias behind the largest rock, shielding him with her body as Boone fired back twice, methodical, sharp, hitting nothing but brush and warning the men above they were not unarmed, not weak. Footsteps thundered on the ridge, shouted commands. They weren't bandits. They were townsfolk, Crane's men, maybe even Crane himself, come to finish the job and burn the name Elias Hart out of memory. Clara's hands were steady as she reloaded. Elias blinked away the haze in his eyes, forcing breath into his cracked lungs. He wanted to stand, to fight, to earn the right to be here again, but his body betrayed him. Still, he watched Clara like a lifeline. She moved with the clarity of someone who had already decided what she was willing to die for. Boone dove for cover beside the creek, ducking behind a fallen log. 4, maybe 5 on the north rise, he called. More circling the south. Clara didn't reply. She was listening, measuring the rhythm of the steps, the pauses in breath, the way men hesitated just before making a move they'd regret. Then she raised her rifle, took a breath, and fired once. A cry echoed across the canyon. One of the men above fell back into the brush. "You want to run?" Boone asked, low and tense. "No," Clara said flatly. "We make them run." Another bullet hit a rock just over Elias's head, sending a shard of stone into his cheek. He barely flinched. His eyes were on Clara. The standoff stretched long and ugly. Gunfire peppered the canyon walls. Boone kept their flanks secure, ducking and firing, moving with trained precision. Clara didn't waste bullets. Every shot had purpose. The men above shouted for surrender, for mercy, for reason. Clara answered with silence. She didn't have time for cowards dressed as justice. And then a whistle, sharp, high-pitched. It cut through the canyon like a command. The gunfire stopped. Elias's breath caught. He knew that sound. Boots crunched on the slope. One man descended the ridge, slow, deliberate, not bothering with cover. He wore a black coat and a star on his chest that gleamed like a lie. Otto Crane. His hat was tilted just enough to hide his eyes from the rising sun, but not enough to hide the sneer on his lips. "Well," he drawled, "ain't this a pretty picture?" Clara stepped out from behind the rock, rifle lowered but not dropped, her shoulders straight. "You're outnumbered," she said. Otto chuckled. "You've got 2. I got 12. I've got truth," she snapped back. "And you got a whole town ready to spit in your grave." Otto paused, smiled, tinning. "That's so." Clara nodded toward Elias, her voice rising. "You tied a man to die because he gave water to starving kids. You think folks won't talk about that? Think word won't spread? Otto is yav ticket. You got a big mouth, little girl. Maybe it's time someone shut it." "You can try," Clara said. Behind her, Boone moved to cover. Elias sat up slowly, ignoring the pain that screamed through his ribs. He knew Otto, knew men like him, the kind who needed others beneath them to feel tall, the kind who couldn't stand being wrong. Otto raised his voice. "Give us the boy thief, and we walk away." "He's a man," Clara said. "He's a criminal." Clara stepped closer. "No, you are." Otto's hand hovered near his revolver. The canyon held its breath. Then Elias spoke, voice hoarse but steady. "Otto." The sheriff's eyes snapped toward him. "You talk a lot for a man who tried to kill someone and still didn't finish the job." Otto's face turned red, mottled with rage. "You got something to say, half-breed?" "Yeah," Elias said, propping himself against a rock. "Come down here and finish it yourself." Otto stepped forward once, just once, then hesitated. Something in Clara's stance, in Boone's stillness, in the calm defiance of Elias's ruined body made him stop. "I'll be back," he hissed. "You can't hide in holes forever." He turned, motioned to his men. Slowly, reluctantly, they retreated. Boots scraped against stone. Guns disappeared into holsters. The ridge cleared. Boone waited another 5 minutes before lowering his shotgun. "They'll be back," he muttered. Clara didn't move. "Then we won't be." That night, they rode hard through the gorge. Elias leaned against Clara, barely conscious. Fever gnawed at his mind, pulling him towards shadows and memory. But he stayed awake long enough to see the flickering lights of a distant homestead, an old ranch, long abandoned. Boone knew it, said the place had once been a horse station back when the trails still ran silver and honest men still wore tin stars. They settled inside. No windows, just holes in the walls. No comfort, just shelter. Clara wrapped Elias in a blanket and pressed cool cloths to his face. "You're burning," she whispered. Elias blinked at her. "You didn't have to come." She looked away. "I did." He reached for her hand. Fingers weak, shaking. She didn't pull away. "You should have left me." "I couldn't." Outside, Boone stood watch, his silhouette lit by the dim glow of a dying moon. The wind carried dust and danger, but for a few hours there was peace. In the morning, Elias woke to find Clara gone. Panic gripped him. He sat up too fast, pain lancing through his chest. Boone caught him before he could fall. "Easy. She's scouting. Said she saw smoke upriver. Might be a camp." Elias nodded slowly. "You trust her?" Boone shrugged. "Don't have to. She trusts you. That's enough." Time passed slowly. Elias drifted between sleep and waking, haunted by the sound of dripping water and the scent of smoke. He dreamed of being tied again, of buzzards pecking at his soul. When he woke, Clara was back. She burst through the door, eyes wild, cheeks flushed. "Crane's men are setting up a post near the river," she said. "They've got wanted posters. Your face. My name. Boone too." Elias sat up straighter. "What now?" Clara knelt before him, her voice fierce. "Now we take the fight to them." Elias stared. "I can't even walk." Clara grabbed his hand. "Then you'll ride. We'll strike fast, get the kids, and get out." "What kids?" "The others. Not just the 3 you helped. There's more now. Hiding in sheds, behind barns, left behind by men like Crane. We get them. We run." Elias's breath caught. "You want to save them all?" "I want to finish what you started." And just like that, he knew. This wasn't just about vengeance or survival. It was about redemption. A second chance for him, for her, for all the children no one else saw. That night, they packed what they could. rifles, saddlebags, dried meat. Clara kissed the cross around her neck and tucked it beneath her collar. "We ride at dawn," she said. Elias nodded. "Let's give him something to remember." He still couldn't stand on his own, but they didn't wait for strength. Some storms you rode into broken. Some wars you fought with every wound still bleeding. They left as the stars faded, 3 riders and a mission no bullet could kill. And far behind them, in Dryfield, Otto Crane woke to the news that Elias Hart had survived and was coming back. They rode without a word. The wind pressed hard against them, carrying the scent of burned cedar and damp dust, Dryfield's breath. Clara led the way, her back rigid, eyes sharp and unblinking. Boone rode behind, watching the trail, his rifle always close. Elias stayed sandwiched between them, tied to the saddle with rope and stubbornness. Every bump in the road felt like a hammer to his ribs. He gritted his teeth and held on. They passed no one, not in the early hours. The land felt emptied, like it had exhaled everyone decent long ago and was still holding its breath. Around midday, Clara slowed her horse and raised a hand. They stopped by a rocky ledge overlooking the basin where the river forked. Below, hidden behind a jagged ridge of red stone, smoke curled from a narrow cluster of buildings. An outpost, half-hidden, quiet, but not abandoned. Boone scanned the scene through a cracked spyglass. Crane's men, no doubt. Looks like 3 wagons. One's loaded heavy, probably supplies. 2 horses staked. And he squinted. Kids. Elias sucked in a breath sharp enough to make him cough. Boone passed the glass to Clara, and her jaw locked. 4 of them, she said, all under 12, sitting by the well tied. Guard. 2 men I can see, probably more inside. She lowered the glass and looked at Elias. What would you have done? Gone in before thinking twice, Elias said, voice rough. Clara gave the hint of a grin. Good, 'cause that's what we're doing. Boone grunted. It's suicide. No, Clara said, sliding off her horse and pulling the rifle from her back. It's necessary. Elias tried to dismount, but nearly collapsed. Boone caught him. You'll stay here, Boone ordered. No, Elias Grolith. I'll cover. From a rock. For where I need to. Just get me to that ledge. They moved fast. Clara circled east, Boone west, flanking the outpost while Elias crawled to the rise above the basin, belly dragging in dust. Boone left his spare rifle with him, and Elias braced it across a stone. Every movement felt like it would tear his body open again, but the pain helped. It kept him focused, awake. Clara waited for Boone's signal. A hawk cry, long drawn out. She rose from the brush like a ghost, rifle at her shoulder. The first guard never even saw her. Her shot cracked through the basin. The man dropped without a sound. Chaos followed. Children screamed. The second guard reached for his pistol. But Boone had already fired. He went down hard, face first in the dust. Then a door burst open. A third man ran out, gun drawn, shouting for backup. Elias took the shot. It rang through his body like a church bell, but it hit clean. The man crumpled. Another door flew open. 2 more. Clara moved fast, too fast to follow. Boone shouted something Elias couldn't make out. The kids scrambled toward the well, crying, tied together by rope at their wrists. And then Clara was there, cutting bonds, kneeling low, whispering something. One of the girls, barely taller than a saddle, clung to her. Elias watched the ridge. Movement. One more man, crouched behind a wagon, rifle steady, aiming for Clara. Elias fired again. Missed. The man turned. Boone yelled. Clara didn't look up. She was shielding the children. Elias gritted his teeth, held his breath, and shot again. This one hit. The man fell back, blood blooming on his chest. Then it was over. Boone cleared the last door. Empty. Clara rounded up the children, whispering comfort, wrapping arms around them like she'd done it 100 times. Elias collapsed behind the ledge, the rifle slipping from his hands. Everything spun. His chest heaved, ribs howling. But the kids were safe. And for now, so were they. They camped that night in an arroyo far from the trail. Clara cleaned the kids' scraped knees. Boone dug into the last of their jerky and Elias sat propped against a boulder, blinking slow and watching it all. It felt real, not like survival, like living. The girl who had clung to Clara earlier crawled into Elias's lap without asking. Her name was Sarah. She had dirt in her eyelashes and a scar along her temple that made Elias's stomach knot. She curled up without a word, just leaned in like she belonged there. Elias wrapped his arms around her gently. He didn't know how to be a father, but he knew how to hold someone who didn't deserve what had been done to them. Later, after the kids were asleep, Boone kept watch again. Clara sat beside Elias. "You good?" she asked. "No," he answered honestly, "but I will be." Clara picked up a twig and began to trace shapes in the dirt. Stars, mountains, maybe a map of something only she could see. The fire cracked low between them. "They'll come harder next time," Elias said. "I know. You could leave." "I won't." He watched her, the way she moved even when still, like tension lived in her bones. "You got someone waiting for you somewhere." Clara shook her head. Never stayed long enough in one place to be waited on. Elias was quiet a long time. "You ever think we're just trading pain for more pain?" She stopped drawing. "Sometimes. But today we took back something. Maybe tomorrow we take more." There was a silence so full it felt loud. Then Clara spoke again. "There's a man in Tallow Ridge. Used to ride with Crane. Named Sim Janders. He keeps a ledger." Elias blinked slowly. "What kind of ledger?" "Names. Deals. Bribes. Crimes covered. If we get it, we prove what Crane is. Maybe even get Dryfield to turn on him." "You trust this Sim?" "No, but I trust what he hides. Men like that always write things down. Makes them feel powerful." Boone called from the brush, low and firm. "Riders. 2. Coming slow." Clara and Elias were up in an instant. She gathered the children into the shelter of a rock hollow, rifle in hand. Boone melted into the dark. Elias leaned hard on a walking stick Boone had fashioned earlier, his knees trembling under his weight. The hoofbeats drew closer, and then voices. One male, one female. Not yelling, talking. Familiar tones. Clara stepped out with her rifle raised. "Who's there?" The riders slowed. The woman was first to respond. "Easy. We ain't with Crane. We're looking for someone." They rode into the firelight. Elias froze. The woman dismounted. Mid-30s. Dust on her coat. Revolver holstered. Eyes wide with recognition. "Elias?" she said. He swallowed. "Ruth?" She nodded, eyes shining. "I thought you were dead." Ruth was his sister. Clara stepped back slowly, watching them both. "Ow!" Elias started, but Ruth rushed forward and embraced him. He winced but didn't pull away. "Been looking for you for months," she whispered. "Heard what they did. I couldn't believe it." Behind her, the man dismounted too. Tall, gaunt, rifle in hand. "Name's Hal," he said. "We've been tracking Crane for weeks. Word is he's planning something bigger." Clara stepped in. "Bigger? Hal no det. Dryfield's getting new money. Railroad wants to come through. Crane's been clearing people out. Ranchers, squatters, anybody who won't sell." Boone spat. "So this is about land." "Always is," Hal said. Ruth looked at Elias. "You're not safe here. None of you." Clara squared her shoulders. "Then we hit them before they finish the job." Boone added, "We've got kids to protect. And Crane to bury." Elias met Ruth's eyes. "You in?" She nodded. "To the end." That night, they made a plan. Tallow Ridge was 2 days away. They'd ride light, split up to confuse any tales. Boone and Hal would lead a decoy team with the children. Clara, Elias, and Ruth would go for the ledger. It was dangerous, desperate, but it was their only shot. As the fire died down and the stars sharpened above, Elias closed his eyes. The pain was still there, always would be. But for the first time in weeks, he saw something beyond it. Not survival, a future. The road to Tallow Ridge was a crooked scar through sunburned land. It wound through sage and dust, over old cattle trails and dry creeks where only bones and broken wagon wheels remained. By the end of the first day, Clara's horse was limping and Elias was nearly unconscious from fever. But they didn't stop. Not when every hour brought Otto Crane closer to wiping out what little proof remained of his crimes. Boone, Hal, and the children had split off at dawn, riding toward Widow Graves' homestead where they'd lay low and gather allies from the old guard. The few who remembered when Dryfield was run by men who feared God more than gold. But Clara, Ruth, and Elias pushed west toward the ledger, toward Sim Janders, the man who'd once been Crane's right hand. By nightfall, they reached a ghost mill just 6 miles shy of Tallow Ridge, half-burned, mostly collapsed, but hidden enough to camp without drawing eyes. Ruth made a fire from pine cones and flint. Clara tended to Elias's wounds with the practiced hands of someone who'd seen enough blood to know where it was coming from. And Elias did what he could to stay conscious. "You were dead," Ruth said finally, breaking the silence. "They said they'd buried you. Said you confessed." Elias blinked, slow and angry. "I confessed to not letting children die thirsty." They left that part out. He glanced at her, lips dry and cracked. "Where'd you go?" Ruth hesitated. "After Mama died, I stayed with the Marshalls. Then war came. I left for Tucson. Never thought I'd hear your name again. Why come back?" She didn't answer for a moment, just kept feeding the fire, her face shadowed by flame. Then, softly, "Because I got tired of hiding." Clara looked up. "Ain't nothing honest left in hiding. It just gives the liars more room to spread." Ruth met her eyes. "That why you're doing this?" Clara's fingers paused over the salve tin. "He saved me once. I never got the chance to repay it. Not till now." Elias leaned back against the cold stone wall. "Didn't save you to be repaid." "I know," she said, and her voice was too soft for anything but truth. "But I still owe you." They slept in shifts. Coyotes howled close, but none dared enter the mill. It reeked of ash and iron. In the morning, Ruth found a covered wagon abandoned by the trail and scavenged 2 fresh canteens and half a sack of cornmeal. Clara brewed coffee black as sin. Elias sat by the fire with his legs wrapped in torn wool, watching the flame twitch like it owed him something. Then Clara stood, adjusting her rifle strap. "We ride the last stretch now," she said. "You ready?" Elias didn't answer. He just nodded. Tallow Ridge wasn't a town so much as it was a crossroads with delusions. A few saloons, a busted church, one store that never seemed open, and a jail that did. And at the far edge of the main road, behind a boarded mercantile with flaking paint, was Jander's place. They saw him through the window first, tall, slick-haired, wearing suspenders too new for a man who claimed to be broke. He didn't look up as they approached. Didn't even flinch when the door creaked open and Clara stepped inside first, rifle low but loaded. Sim Janders barely raised an eyebrow. "Didn't think I'd see you again, Miss Mason." "You won't after today," she said. "Where's the ledger?" Janders leaned back in his chair, folding his hands across his gut. "And why would I give that to you?" Ruth came in next, pistol drawn. "Because it's about to get real lonely out here if you don't." Elias was last. He limped through the door, leaning hard on his makeshift cane. Janders froze. His face went pale. "No," he whispered. "You're dead?" Elias asked. "Not yet. Sin Jandir sotod slavly." "Listen, I didn't tie you. You sold me out," Elias said. "You told Crane where I'd be. You lied in court." "I had no choice," Sim snapped. "He said he'd hang me. You should have let him." The room pulsed with silence. Then Clara stepped forward. "The ledger. Now." Janders glanced toward back room. "Even if I give it to you, it won't matter. Crane's already planning something bigger. He's got Pinkertons coming. Real law. Then they'll need something real to read," Ruth said. Janders sighed and walked to the back. He returned a minute later with a bound book, thick, yellowed, and stained. "You didn't get this from me." "No," Clara said, "but they'll know it came from someone who finally grew a spine." Outside, the air shifted. Boone was there, unexpected, breathless, his coat dusted in blood. "They found the kids," he panted. "Widow Graves is dead. Hal's missing." Ruth went cold. Clara grabbed Elias's arm to keep him from falling over. "What happened?" she demanded. Boone looked down. "Someone talked." "Someone always does." Elias's jaw clenched. "Crane didn't come himself. Sent men. Burned the place to ash." Ruth turned to Janders. "Did you say anything?" He raised his hands. I swear nothing. I've been locked in here for weeks. Elias stepped close. Hope you locked it from the outside. They rode fast again, straight east. Smoke still marked the ruins of Widow Graves' house. Black streaks climbing skyward like grief trying to escape. The kids were gone. So was Hal. No tracks, just chaos. Burned blankets. A broken locket. Blood in the snow. Clara dropped to her knees and pressed her hand to the earth. Elias turned away, eyes burning. We follow, Boone said. No, Clara replied. We don't chase. Elias looked at her sharply. What do you mean? We draw him out. Ruth understood first. You're going to offer yourself. Clara nodded. You want the message. He wants fear. Then we give him something else entirely. Elias staggered forward. No, Clara faced him. Yes. He grabbed her wrist. I've already been tied once. I won't watch you take my place. Clara didn't look away. Then don't watch. Fight. That night, they sent word to Dryfield. A rider left a note pinned to the chapel door. If you want the girl, come to Devil's Wash by dawn. Bring the children. It was signed in red. The dead don't stay dead. They knew he'd come. Crane wouldn't pass up the chance to humiliate them again, especially not with the taste of Widow Graves' fire still fresh in his mouth. At Devil's Wash, the wind howled low between canyon walls. Boone and Ruth positioned themselves in the cliffs, rifles ready. Elias crouched beneath a ledge, wrapped in black, heart hammering. Clara stood alone in the basin, lit by a single torch. Dawn crawled in like a thief. Then they came. Crane rode first, on a white horse, because of course he did. Behind him were 10 men, all armed, dragging the children in a wagon. Hal was with them too, bloody tied, barely conscious. Crane dismounted, smug. Didn't think you'd make it this easy, he said to Clara. Clara stood her ground. You never think far enough. Where's the ghost boy? Hart. Where he belongs. Watching. Crane looked around. Not much of a trap. Clara smirked. It's not a trap. It's a reckoning. The first shot came from Ruth, clean through the throat of Crane's second. Boone followed, 2 down before they could turn. Elias rose then, rifle aimed, breath held. The basin became fire. Crane ducked, shouting. The children screamed. Clara grabbed 2, dragging them behind the wagon. Elias moved fast, faster than he should have been able, helping the others. Ruth leapt down from the cliff, covering Hal, as Boone cleared the last shooter. Crane fired wildly, bullets chipping stone. He ran for his horse. Elias stepped in his path. They stared at each other. You should be dead, Crane hissed. You first, Elias said. He shot him once, low, clean, enough to drop him. Then he walked past him to help Clara lift Hal. The battle was over. But the war wasn't. Crane lived. For now. And they had the ledger. As the sun rose over Devil's Wash, Elias' heart stood surrounded by survivors. Dirt on his boots, blood on his shirt, hope in his chest. He wasn't done yet. Crane's men lay scattered across Devil's Wash, their rifles cooling beside bodies never meant to hit the ground. The canyon had gone quiet again, except for the wind rising through the cuts in the stone, like it was mourning in its own way. Elias stood at the center of it all, the rifle heavy in his hands, his chest rising and falling in ragged heaves. Clara knelt beside Hal, pressing cloth to the wound in his side, as Boone cut the last of the ropes from the children's wrists. They were quiet, too quiet for kids that young, but they clung to each other like roots to dry earth. Crane groaned nearby, writhing in the dirt with a bullet lodged clean through his thigh. He tried to drag himself toward his horse, but Elias walked over and planted a boot squarely between his shoulders. You're done, Elias said low, nearly a growl. Crane coughed, spit blood. You think this ends anything? It ends you. Boone came up behind Elias. We don't kill him here. Elias didn't move his foot. Why not? Because he's worth more alive. His name, his voice. We get him to Dryfield. Let the people hear what he did. Let them look him in the eye before they choose what justice looks like. Ruth joined them, pistol drawn. You sure the town will choose right? No, Clara said from behind them, standing now. Her voice was hard and tired. But we have to believe something still matters. Elias met Boone's eyes. Slowly, he stepped off Crane's back. Then we take him. Tying Crane wasn't easy. He squirmed and spat, try to bargain, then to threaten. But Boone knocked him cold with the butt of his rifle before any of them had to listen much longer. They stripped him of every weapon and bound him hand and foot, hoisting him into the wagon with Hal and the children. Boone took reins of the horses, and they set off northeast, back toward the place Elias never thought he'd see again. Dryfield. They rode slow. Every creak of the wagon wheels echoed too loud in Elias's ears. They'd won the fight at Devil's Wash, but every step closer to Dryfield reminded him how deep Crane's route ran. Money, power, fear, it had kept the man above justice this long. What if the people didn't care? What if they welcomed him back with open arms and shot the rest of them for daring to interrupt the peace? Clara seemed to sense his thoughts. She rode beside him, quiet for a long time. Then finally, "You think they'll believe it?" "They don't have to believe," Elias said. "They just have to listen." "We'll make them listen," Ruth added. They camped near a dry riverbed that night, under a sky so wide it made Clara feel small again. Elias sat apart from the others, sharpening a blade with slow, rhythmic scrapes, watching stars with eyes that had seen too many betrayals. Ruth joined him, sitting cross-legged. "I remember when we used to wish on stars," she said softly. "I remember thinking stars gave a damn," Elias muttered. She nudged him. "You ever wonder what we'd be if Mama hadn't died? If Pa hadn't vanished?" He shook his head. "Ain't no point wondering." "But do you?" He paused. "Sometimes. Maybe we'd have land. Chickens. A porch swing." She smiled, bittersweet. "I'd have liked that." He looked over at her. "We're not those people." "No," she agreed. "We're the ones who show up when the porch swing burns down and rebuild it from ash." The next morning, Dryfield rose on the horizon like a lie dressed in Sunday best. From a distance, it looked untouched. White steeple, clean roads, the railroad lines being laid down past the northern ridge. But as they got closer, they saw the cracks. The fear. Faces peeking through curtains. The sheriff gone. Half the stores boarded. A town that hadn't chosen Crane out of love, only survival. Boone and Ruth rode ahead with the ledger, heading straight for Mayor Lyman, a man known for folding under the weight of pressure. Clara stayed by the wagon with Elias, who sat beside Crane's groaning frame, gun drawn. When they reached the square, folks began to gather. Not many at first, but then the whispering started. "Ilyush Harchalife." They caught Crane. "There's proof." Clara stepped up on the wagon bed. "We have something to show you." Boone and Ruth returned with the mayor in tow. A balding, trembling man with too much waistcoat and not enough courage. "This is Sim Jander's ledger," Boone announced. "Everything Crane's done. Names, dates, payments, murders." The mayor stammered. "We can't act on personal ledgers. This is hardly." Ruth pulled a second book from her coat. "And this one is from your own office. Signed permits. Confiscated properties. Half of them went to Crane's people." The crowd murmured louder. Clara pulled the tarp off the back of the wagon. Crane lay there, blinking up at the sun, blood caked on his thigh, fury in his eyes. "You know me," he spat. "You know what I've done for this town." "That's the problem," Elias said, stepping into view. A gasp rippled through the people. "Elias," someone said. I thought I was left to die," Elias said, "tied to a cactus for saving children, while this man made Dryfield his own graveyard. You want justice?" Ruth said, "Here it is. You decide." There was a long silence. Then a voice from the crowd. "He took my land." Another. "He had my brother jailed for speaking out." And another. "He sent men after my daughter." It built like a tide, until the mayor raised a hand, shaking. "Put him in the jail." Boone hauled Crane off the wagon, dragging him through the crowd. He screamed, kicked, but no one helped him. Doors opened. People stepped out. Faces once afraid, now watching. By dusk, Crane was behind bars. But Elias didn't feel victory. Not yet. They stayed in Dryfield for 3 days. Long enough to see the children return to families. Long enough to see Sim Janders testify, Mayor Lyman resign, and the sheriff's badge passed to a woman named Molly Denton, one of the few who tried to protect Elias all those months ago. Clara packed her things on the 4th morning. Elias found her by the stables. "You leaving?" She nodded. I was never built to settle. You could try. She smiled at him. You'll stay. He looked out over Dryfield. For now, the town needs someone to remind it what matters. She mounted her horse. Then I'll come back when the stars start to fade. He nodded. I'll keep him lit. She rode off, dust rising in her wake. Ruth stood beside him now, watching. She'll come back, Ruth said. I know. And you? Elias took a deep breath. I'm going to build something. Not sure what yet. Well, Ruth said, slipping her arm through his. We've always been better at fixing broken things anyway. Dryfield wasn't saved. Not yet, but it was different. It had seen what justice looked like, what courage cost, and what happened when the people stood up together. Elias' heart lived, and the land would remember. The rains came 2 weeks later, fast and hard, like they'd been waiting just over the mountains for the last sins to rise before washing them all down. Dust turned to thick clay, roofs leaked through their nail holes, and horses slipped on stone roads turned to syrup. Dryfield had never been built for rain, not really. The church roof gave first, then the grain store. The jailhouse leaked worst of all. Otto Crane was moved to the cellar of the old bank, chained by wrists and ankles. But even there, the water found him. Elias stood over him once, boots half submerged, watching as Crane struggled against the rising damp. He didn't say a word, just looked down until Crane finally spat up at him and turned away. Kill me then, Crane snarled. Be done with it. Elias didn't move. That's too kind. You think you won? Crane barked, his voice raw from mold and shame. I had 20 years in this town. You think a week of tears and talk changes that? You ain't saved nothing. You just delayed the rot. Elias crouched, so low their faces nearly met. Then I'll delay it again tomorrow, and the day after that, until there's nothing left of you but a smell in the stone. He stood, walked away, and didn't look back again. But Crane wasn't wrong. Dryfield had been his for too long. It wasn't just his name on land grants or saloon deeds. It was the habits he'd carved into people's spines. Fear didn't vanish with a jail cell. It lingered in hands too used to silence. That was the war Elias fought now. Each day, he helped mend fences, fix what the storm broke, and try not to flinch when people stared too long. Some offered thanks. Others couldn't meet his eyes. There were whispers still. About the night he stole water, about the children, about how a man tied to a cactus had walked back into town like death turned around halfway and lost its courage. Boone stayed, helping where he could. Ruth took up part-time duties under the new sheriff, Molly Denton, whose voice never rose above calm and whose boots carried authority without ever stomping. Hal, slow to recover, took a room above the apothecary and became the town's unofficial blacksmith again, hammering iron with a rhythm that seemed to steady even Elias's heartbeat. But Clara hadn't returned. Not yet. Elias didn't say her name out loud, but he thought it in quiet moments, when he walked past the old barn where she'd first found him bloody and bound, or when he saw the sky shift to dusk the way it had the night she'd left. He kept the cactus thorn she'd pulled from his arm. He kept the tin cup she'd placed in his hands. The ledger, the one that had unraveled everything, now sat locked in the sheriff's office, its pages sealed but never forgotten. It had names, too many of them still living in Dryfield. And one day, Molly said they'd all answer for what they'd done. But that day hadn't come yet. Instead, Elias found himself on the edge of town one morning, watching a wagon limp over the horizon. It was sagging hard to the left, axle cracked, one mule barely breathing. A girl sat atop it, young, maybe 16, with dirt smudges on her cheeks and eyes too wide for someone so small. He stepped out as the wagon creaked to a stop. She looked down at him. Are you Mr. Hart? He blinked. Depends who's a-skinned. My name's Marin, she said. They told me to find you. Said you help people who've got nowhere else. He didn't hesitate. Come on, he said. We'll get you a place to sleep. Ruth met them halfway down the lane, eyes narrowing at the girl's bruised knuckles and torn dress. You from the McConnell Ranch? She asked. Marin nodded. It's gone. Fire took it last week. I think, she hesitated. I think someone set it. Elias stiffened. Boone arrived behind them, saddlebag slung over one shoulder. You think Crane still got men out there? Boone asked. No, Ruth said. I think some of his rot stayed behind, even after we pulled the weed. They took Marin in, found her a bed at Widow Platt's boarding house, and work folding linens at the chapel. But something lingered behind her eyes, some fear that didn't fade even when she smiled. Elias knew that look. He'd seen it in his own mirror. Marin wasn't the only one. 2 nights later, another fire lit the southern ridge. Elias saw it from his porch, a bright smear against black hills. He mounted his horse without a word and rode into it, Boone and Ruth flanking him minutes later. When they arrived, the Miller cabin was ash. The family, for kids and a mother too worn for her age, stood with blankets around their shoulders, staring into the remains of their life. No one saw who did it, but everyone had guesses. By morning, 3 more families had packed their things and vanished down the northern road. Dryfield was bleeding people again, not from poverty, not for drought, from fear. Sheriff Denon called a town meeting. Only 24 showed. Elias stood by the window, arms crossed, watching faces flicker in lamplight. This town, Molly began, belongs to all of us. But it won't if we let shadows scare us back into silence. We have kids, one woman said. We saw what Crane did to people who stood up. He's in a cell now, Molly answered. Cells can be opened. Elias stepped forward. So we let him win? Let the ghosts of his boys keep burning our homes and driving us out one by one. You don't understand. I was tied to a cactus, Elias said, voice quiet. Left to bake in the sun for doing the right thing. And still I came back. Still I stayed. If that ain't enough to make you fight for this place, maybe you never really wanted it. Silence. Then a man stood. Thomas Weaver. Used to run the general store before Crane's men burned it last year. I'll stand with you, Thomas said. Then another. And another. By end of night, they had 10 volunteers. Not lawmen, just townsfolk tired of being afraid. Ruth organized watches. Boone sharpened fence posts into spears. Elias taught them how to shoot without wasting a bullet. Clara still hadn't come back. Until she did. The morning broke golden. The first real warmth in weeks. Elias stood by the well, rope in hand, when he saw the horse. And then the hat. She rode up slow, dust haloed around her like memory. Same coat, same calm. She dismounted before he could speak and said simply, Heard you were building something. I was waiting on better nails, Elias said. She smiled. Well, here I am. He didn't ask why she returned. She didn't explain. Some things are stronger when left unspoken. They worked together again, side by side, Clara teaching Ruth how to hold a knife, just so, Elias showing Marin how to trap rabbits for stew. Boone trained the volunteers in shifts. Hal started forging nails and horseshoes again. The town felt different, not safe, not healed, but held together. Then came the letter. No postmark, just an envelope nailed to the chapel door. Inside, a single sentence. You can jail a man, but not an idea. Crane was only the beginning. Under it, a symbol burned into the page. A circle with a jagged crack down the middle. Elias read it 3 times. Looks like the rot's still deeper than we thought, Boone said. We need to find out who sent it, Ruth added. Clara looked at Elias. We're not done. No, he said, eyes narrowing. We're just getting started. They called themselves the Divide. No one in Dryfield knew the name before that letter. But by the end of the week, it was whispered in every alley, scratched into fences, and smeared in soot across the barn wall behind Hal's forge. Always the same mark. A broken circle cleaved like the land itself. And with it came threats, quiet ones. Empty chicken coops. Missing water barrels. A burnt prayer book left on the chapel steps. But the silence between these signs carried the true weight. Elias knew enough of ghosts to know this wasn't about one man anymore. Crane might have been the head of it, but something deeper, older, was buried in the soil, and now that they'd stirred it, it had claws. Boone found the first body. A boy, maybe 15, hung from a tree near the East Trail. No name, no boots, just a note pinned to his chest with a rusted nail. We remember who you fight for. It took Ruth and Sheriff Denon half the day to get him down. The mother a widow who scrubbed floors in the schoolhouse, didn't speak a word. Just took his hat and walked back in her home without even shutting the door behind her. Clara buried the boy herself. Elias stood beside her with the shovel, silent, jaw clenched. The sun didn't shine that day, not for 1 second. After that, nothing held still. Maren disappeared. One morning, she was folding sheets behind the chapel, humming that old song about willow trees. By midday, she was gone. No tracks, no note. No one saw who took her or when, but everyone knew who. Ruth broke the mug in her hand when she heard blood mixing with tea on the floor. Boone nearly tore the postmaster off his horse for smiling too long. Elias didn't speak for a full hour. He just walked, out past the well, past the graves Clara had lined up so carefully, all the way to the edge of town where the dirt road split into two ragged arms, one to the old mine, long collapsed, the other to Crane's family ranch, abandoned since the trial. That's where the next sign came. A tree, limbs stripped bare. Hanging from it, Maren's scarf, tied loose, not like a noose, like a message. Clara found Elias there, his fingers white on the hilt of his knife. "They want you angry," she said. "I am angry. They want you reckless." He looked at her. "I'm not." They rode together that evening to the ranch. No one else followed. Elias insisted. He needed to see it himself. The place hadn't changed much. Still stood half-slumped on its haunches like a dying animal, porch sagging, wind moaning through the roof beams. The barn door was missing. Inside, they found fresh boot prints, a fire pit, scraps of cloth, and under the floorboards, just past the broken piano, Clara's foot hit something hard. Elias pried up the boards. A trunk. Inside, maps, names, lists, letters marked with Crane's initials, but in a different hand. The divide had been around long before Crane ever came to Dryfield. He was just their voice, Elias said, flipping through the letters. "Then who's left now?" Clara asked. He didn't answer. That night, they returned to town with the trunk. Ruth read through every page, eyes scanning faster than most could think. One name repeated. Malcolm Clay. A banker. Retired. Lived 2 towns over. Came into Dryfield once every other month. No family. No reason to be involved. Unless he had every reason. Crane's men didn't know how to write this way. Ruth said, holding up one letter. "Clay wrote these. Probably paid for everything, too." Boone cracked his knuckles. "So we ride?" "We ride." They left at dawn. Elias, Clara, Boone, Ruth, and Sheriff Denton. 5 against whatever waited in the hills. The children begged to come. Even Hal offered, though his leg hadn't mended right. But Elias refused. "If we don't come back, you keep the fire going." They reached Red Mound before sunset. Clay's house stood at the edge of town, too nice for the dust that tried to claim it. A white picket fence, fresh paint, a porch swing that actually swung. But the moment Elias stepped onto that porch, he knew. The door opened before he knocked. Malcolm Clay stood there in a red waistcoat, hair neatly combed, holding a cup of tea. "I was wondering how long it would take," he said. Ruth's gun was out in a blink. "Where's Maren?" Clay sipped his tea, unbothered. "Safe. For now." Denton raised her rifle. "Don't play games." "I don't need to," Clay said. "You've already lost." Elias stepped forward. "You've been behind this the whole time. I gave men like Crane a voice. That's all. Men afraid of change. Afraid of losing what their fathers left them." "Your fathers left you poison," Elias growled. Clay laughed. "They left power. I just kept it in the right hands." "You kidnapped a child." "I saved a future," he snapped. "Maren's bloodline ties back to land my father lost. I'm just restoring what's ours." Elias punched him before the others could stop him. Clay hit the floor, blood on his teeth. "Where is she?" Elias demanded. Clay spat. "In the mine. The old one. You'll never make it before." But Elias was already moving. Boone tackled Clay. "We'll handle him." Clara and Ruth followed Elias, galloping out of town, dirt rising like smoke behind them. The sun dropped fast, turning the hills red and gold. By the time they reached the mine, night was on them. The entrance gaped like a wound. Clara lit a torch. "We go together." They stepped inside. The air was wrong. Heavy. Damp. A tunnel curved down and split in three. They took the center path. Voices echoed, then a scream. Elias ran first. Torchlight blurred. The walls pressed in. At the end of the tunnel, Marin, tied to a beam, bruised, eyes wild. Beside her, a man they didn't know. Long coat, mask, holding a match. "Don't move," he warned. "This whole place is soaked in kerosene." Elias stopped cold. "You'll kill her too." The man didn't flinch. "She's a message, just like you were." Clara stepped forward calm. "You light that match, and you die before it hits the ground." He turned to her, curious. "You think this is about one girl?" "No," Ruth said from behind him. "It's about all of us." She fired first. The match never dropped. The man crumpled. Clara lunged for Marin, cutting ropes, pulling her close. Elias grabbed the torch, stomped it out. The mine stayed dark, but they walked out together. Alive. Back in Dryfield, word spread fast. Malcolm Clay disappeared from his cell that night. No one saw who took him. But the next morning, a broken circle was found carved into the jail door. The divide wasn't done, but neither were they. Elias stood in the chapel with Clara, watching Marin sleep. "She's safe now," Clara whispered. "For now," Elias said. "You think they'll come back?" He nodded. "They always do. Then we'll be ready." Outside, the rain began again. But this time it felt like cleansing. The morning after they pulled Marin out of the mine, the sky cracked open. Not with rain this time, but light, clear and gold, and almost too gentle to believe. After weeks of ash and threat, of shadows left in corners and names whispered like curses, Dryfield stood in quiet stillness, as if even the wind paused to take a breath. Chickens called from their coops again. Smoke rose from clean chimneys. And for a brief, flickering second, it felt like maybe, just maybe, the land itself had decided to stop punishing them. But Clara knew better. The divide hadn't vanished. They'd just changed shape again, like smoke through fingers. Malcolm Clay was gone. Escaped, or more likely released, from the jail under cover of night. The lock hadn't been picked. It had been opened with a key. No broken bars. No forced doors. Someone on the inside had helped him walk free. And while Elias tried to pretend otherwise, the truth burned behind his eyes every time he looked out over the town square. The ledger hadn't accounted for loyalty bought in silence. Every system they made has cracks in it, Ruth said as she passed out fresh rounds to the night watch. And they know everyone. Elias stood on the sheriff's porch, arms folded, eyes on the North Trail. "That's what makes it dangerous," he murmured. "They don't need armies, just holes in the fence." Boone nodded. "And all we got are hammers. Then we keep hammering." Dryfield wasn't waiting anymore. Not for help. Not for heroes. They built their own. One woman trained as a nurse, just in case. Another took charge of teaching the children in a barn after the old schoolhouse lost its roof. Thomas Weaver reopened the general store with help from Hal, and Clara, without announcement or ceremony, quietly made herself part of everything. She walked behind people when they were scared and in front of them when they were in danger. Elias saw it all. He saw the way she tied her braid tighter every time a stranger came into town. He saw the way she still checked the windows at night, watched the hills like they might open up and spill more men with broken circle brands on their coats. He saw the weight she carried, and one night he asked her why she stayed. They stood behind the chapel, the lantern between them casting soft shadows. Marin slept inside now, safer in that old prayer hall than anywhere else. "You could have gone back east," he said. "Could have found a place without all this." Clara looked down at the calluses on her fingers. "I don't think I'd trust peace if I found it," she said. "Not anymore." "You think we'll ever earn it?" "I think we already did," she said. "That's why they hate us so much." They stood in silence for a long time. Then Elias said, "You ever wonder what life would have been if I hadn't stolen that water?" Clara turned to him, not smiling, but softer somehow. "I try not to think about lives that didn't happen." He nodded. "But if you had to guess, I'd still be breathing. But I don't think I'd be alive." That was all they said about it. A week later, a letter came again, this time left under Elias's door. No broken circle. No signature. Just words. "The divide doesn't die. It waits. Beneath every town that forgets." Elias didn't show it to anyone right away. He stared at it long, memorized the lines. Then he burned it in the stove and went outside. Dryfield was holding its breath again, waiting, wondering if it would be next. But Elias wasn't. He rode out that afternoon, Clara behind him, Boone and Ruth on their heels. They rode the old trade trail north toward the outposts. They talked to farmers, to passing riders, to railroad men. And what they found was worse than they'd feared. The divide was spreading. Not in battles, not in blood, but in ownership. Land bought by aliases. Men placed in sheriff's posts. Judges that suddenly disappeared. Names that no one remembered arriving, but who had power too fast for it to be earned. It wasn't just Dryfield anymore. It was everywhere. Boone stood by a riverbed near the border town of Bridger and shook his head. We cut off the head, and all we did was piss off the tail. Then we cut again, Elias said. And again. They brought back names, documents, proof. And when they returned to Dryfield 2 weeks later, Elias stood in the chapel, just like he had when it all first fell apart, and told them the truth. It's not over. It never was. But that doesn't mean we stop, because now we know what we're fighting. And that's more than most towns get. Someone in the crowd asked, "What do we do?" Clara stepped up beside him. "We prepare. We protect. We hold each other accountable." Ruth added, "We train. We speak. We don't turn away." Boone crossed his arms. "And if they come again?" Elias's eyes swept the room. "Then we show them what happens when a town remembers." They made a pact that night. Not on paper, not with blood, but with a simple phrase painted across the chapel wall by morning: "No divide here." The next season came with wind. New families arrived. Survivors. Drifters with stories too close to Dryfield for comfort. They were welcomed, tested, watched carefully, but welcomed. Maren grew in her voice, teaching other girls how to ride, how to fight. Hal's forge never cooled. Sheriff Denton deputized Ruth. Boone took to teaching kids how to read when he wasn't training the volunteers. And Elias stayed right at the center. He never claimed leadership, but he became it. One hard morning, Clara found him on the porch, holding that same cactus thorn she'd pulled from his skin all those months ago. "You still carry that?" He nodded. "Pain teaches better than comfort." She sat beside him. "And what's it taught you lately?" "That I don't want to do this alone." She didn't respond right away, but she didn't leave either. That night, the stars came out brighter than they had in years. Elias stood at the edge of town, listening. Nothing moved in the dark. No alphabets, no voices, just peace. But this time he trusted it, not because it was safe, but because it was built on something real. People, wounds, fires survived, and hands that still remembered how to hold a gun, even when they longed to put it down. Elias Hart wasn't a hero. He was just a man who once stole water to save children. And now, he made sure no one had to steal to survive. Not in Dryfield. Not again.